Now that he's announced, what are President Biden's true chances of getting reelected? Can he defeat Donald Trump or anyone else that the Republicans put forward? I'm Matt Robeson, Beyond Politics. We're on the Blue Amp channel on YouTube and available wherever you get your podcasts. I am joined today by conservative commentator, analyst, and consultant Alicia Preston. President Biden formally announcing that he is running for reelection with an understated video in which he sounded themes of this is about freedom, is about protecting our rights and standing up to the MAGA Republican threat, an initial bet like Nerf gun to our face. What do you think President Biden's reelection chances are?
I think it's 50-50. I do. I think his announcement topics were a mistake. You don't come out and announce you're running for president by running against a group of Americans. And his message about the MAGAs, look, that's a movement by a chunk of Americans. Probably 25-30% of Americans are part of that movement. And even if it's a little less, you don't run against a sector of the people you represent. It was just uncomfortable. As someone who is decidedly not a MAGA American, I thought it was uncomfortable. That being said, as it sits now, Donald Trump would be the person he's running against. And I can't say I know what would happen between that. I think it's tight. Tighter than it was in 2020.
I saw the video differently because, for one thing, he's definitely doing a Rose Garden strategy of occupying the White House to your advantage, not in the illegal way that Donald Trump did when he held the Republican convention at the White House, which you're not allowed to do. There's a law called the Hatch Act that says you can't do that. Be the president and continue being the president as long as you can. So I didn't think that the video was a problem. The understated quality of the announcement was a problem. And I don't think the tone was a problem. Most of the content was about uniting the country. Commentators, pundits and analysts and panelists like us were critical when Joe Biden last September did that major speech where he called out MAGA Republicans and he called them semi-fascist, semi-authoritarian. He wouldn't go full. He would just go to semi. And we said, wrong tone. This is not the right theme. You've got to run on the economy. You've got to address inflation. But the authors of that strategy, Naveen Nayak, former guest on this show, and Jeffrey Pollack, former guest on this show, a pollster and a political strategist, said, look, we have the numbers behind this. And Americans get this. They understand this. What you said on this show last week is that Americans are rejecting the crazy, right? The lesson of 2022 is we are over this. We are done with the crazy. We don't like it. And I think calling it out as you're running for president, how did he announce his presidential campaign the first time? Fighting for the soul of the nation, fighting to win back the soul of the country. This is the same theme. Who are you fighting against? Every good story needs a villain. I was okay with it. I was okay with the tone.
I don't think it can be considered a unifying announcement or speech when he says, except for you guys, except for you tens of millions of people that are
the deplorables,
the deplorables,
yes,
except for you guys. I want to unify everybody else except you guys. I don't like you Americans. And look, it's not Joe Biden's problem. It's America's problem. Look at the violence, political violence in this country. I expected more from Joe Biden the first time around. I've followed Joe Biden for years. I got to interview him several times as a reporter when he was in New Hampshire, either campaigning for people or himself back when. And I always liked him. He's affable. He's nice. He loves his country. I believe all those things to this day. But I think he's been pushed to a place of participating in this division when I expected him to work harder to unite. And I'm disappointed in that.
Again, I don't quite see it that way because I think what Joe Biden is saying is, I can't even with you people. And I think that's okay. I don't see it as a criticism or a problem to say, I'm willing to unite the country. But there are there's a segment of this country that does not even want to try, and that has embraced violence, authoritarianism, and that has tried to overcome the peaceful democratic transfer of power. This is something that you and I agree on. You're unusual for your party in that you are willing to call an insurrection an insurrection. You are willing to say, you know what? This was evil. It was wrong. It was anti-American. These people deserve to be locked up, which many of them are. And if you have a segment of this country that is into all of that and they're unrecalcitrant, wow, that was a $1,000 word. They don't feel bad about this at all. And you've got Donald Trump celebrating them by starting his first presidential campaign rally with a song by the J6 chorus, people who are in jail for beating police officers with the American flag while they were trying to overthrow the government of this country. And Donald Trump says, we're going to celebrate you. Matter of fact, we're going to have this rally in Waco, Texas, where 28 children died and 4 federal law enforcement officers and dozens of other adult Americans, because there was an insane faction that was trying to stand off against the government, that was armed, that had bombs. And you're celebrating this as Donald Trump. I think you fight people like that. I don't think you break bread with them.
I think you're putting too many people in the same group, just like there are different degrees of liberalism or conservatism or anything else. There are absolutely different degrees of those who consider themselves MAGA Republicans. I know a lot of them who do not support what happened on January 6th, who are still scratching their head why the month of the anniversary of the Waco siege, he would hold a rally there, who don't support the hate, the division, the violence. I know a lot of Republicans who will vote for Donald Trump any and every single time he runs for office and do not support that kind of action.
I don't think people get to have it both ways. I don't think they get to say, I'm going to stay agnostic on this whole insurrection, overthrow the country with violence issue. I think if you support Donald Trump and you're just like, I don't support the violent insurrection part of it, but I like the rest of it, you don't get away with that. There's no middle ground on that. Look, I support where you're coming from in general. You and I share a political philosophy, which is we don't have to agree on absolutely everything to be part of a political party. And we happen to agree most fundamentally on the idea that we wish more Americans were like us, because the two of us can get along, we can be friends, we can be colleagues, we can have debates, we can occasionally go at each other pretty hard, but we can fundamentally respect one another, and we have real points of policy disagreement. That is great. And your point is right. And I support it. And I'd support it for just about everyone else. But you can't do it. You can't hand wave away the red line crossing that Donald Trump has done. Even up to that point, I might have said, okay, we disagree on the extent to which Donald Trump is responsible for killing hundreds of thousands of Americans because of his vaccine, mask, and COVID denialism. We disagree on the family separation policy, and maybe what he did at the border was horrible, but some of the things Obama did were not good either. And so maybe it's a matter of degrees. Everything up to that point. But I think at the point of the insurrection, you've gone over a red line, and people have to decide. This is one issue where you have to decide what issue you want. I will say, I don't want to cut off you making another point on this topic, but I do want to get back to the media obsession, kind of horse race nature of this, because I do think it's fundamental to the question. I think you and I agree that if Donald Trump were to get reelected as president, and he's the likely Republican nominee, it could represent an extinction level event. I'm talking like they say the meteor that killed the dinosaurs was an extinction level event for life on Earth. I'm talking an extinction level event for American democracy. So this question of will Joe Biden win is a big one. Right before the show, I sent you an article from Roy Teixeira. He's a noted political scientist and a very influential one. And he was tapping the brakes on Democrats feeling, well, if it's Biden versus Trump again, this is Biden who's gonna shoo his way in. What did you make of that argument?
He lays out 5 separate points as to why he thinks it could be. And one that struck me hard is that Joe Biden needs the working class to win, and he is losing the working class. And that's true. And look, people have fickle memories. I know Donald Trump's in the news every day for whatever nonsense he's spewing, but people have fickle memories of just how difficult it was to live under Donald Trump's presidency. It was chaos. It was constant anger and hate. And it was a very difficult time as an American, as far as I'm concerned. But people forget that. And what do they do now as working class? They look at the fact they can't afford a home. They look at the fact that they can't afford groceries. They look at the fact that they can't afford their energy bills or to gas up their trucks to get to work. So if he can't come up with a way to increase his support among the working class, that could benefit Donald Trump.
I agree with that point. Although the interesting thing about Roy Teixeira is, for political nerds, is that 20 years ago, he wrote a book called The Emerging Democratic Majority, in which he argued with his co-author, John Judas, no relation to the biblical character, that the growth of certain demographic groups in America, Latino Americans, African Americans, the disproportionate number of women in the electorate, more American adults are women than men, meant that the Democratic Party was going to enjoy an insurpassable majority in the coming years. There were two problems here. One is that demographics was not destiny. It turns out that people's political views are not determined solely by their ethnicity or their sex. And those things have evolved in the last 20 years. And it caused Roy Teixeira himself to reassess his own argument about 6 or 7 years later and recant it. The second problem here is that Democrats overlearned the lessons of that original book. I remember this. We were all talking about this when I was a Capitol Hill staffer and a campaign manager. This was an article of faith among young Democrats because I used to be young. It was awesome. And we were pretty high on our own supply. Like, this is great. We just have to wait for people to get a little older and start voting more. And we are in. We don't have to do anything except not be terrible. And that was we got this false signal in the Obama 2008 election where it was the Obama coalition, right? Young voters, African-American voters, Latino voters, women. And we thought, see, it's coming true. It's happening. The reality is that's not really what was happening. And in fact, Obama was only reelected in 2012 because of his overperformance with Rust Belt, white, non-college educated voters. The exact set of voters, Alicia Preston, that you, super smart political analyst that you are, just honed in on again. And that is a group that has been departing the Democratic Party in droves and now is solidly Republican. So that long history lesson is in service of this point. I think that's fair. I think that's true. The issue I would take with it, though, is that it's a totally demographic-based argument that runs smack dab against performance, because where do you see a concentration of those types of voters that leads to them being the dominant group that determines election outcomes? Well, in those Rust Belt states, in the kind of the blue wall states that Trump cracked in 2016 in order to be able to win the presidency. And what we've seen in the last 8 years is a steady migration to the Democratic column. Tony Evers winning the governorship in Wisconsin, Georgia not being part of that blue wall, but now solidly performing election after election, both presidential and midterm, in the Democratic column, re-electing Raphael Warnock. And Arizona, and then Pennsylvania moving further blue, Michigan moving further blue, Gretchen Whitmer winning again. Now, you could say, okay, in the latter two cases, Josh Shapiro, very strong gubernatorial candidate, but also up against Doug Mastriano, a MAGA nutball, right? Gretchen Whitmer, same story, like good candidate, but up against a MAGA nutball. But that's essentially what we're talking about here, is that if the contrast is up against MAGA people, you look at the map, and demographics is one thing, but the electoral map is another. And what the map math tells us right now is that Trump would have to sweep. If Trump is the nominee, he would have to sweep Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona to overcome the electoral college math and defeat Joe Biden. That seems like a tall order.
It is. However, like I said, 4 years is a lot longer than 2 years. And the 2022 election showed us, I don't necessarily buy that Pennsylvania or Georgia or some of the other places you mentioned are going into the blue column. I think a lot of those races were going into the not crazy column, as I've said before. And let's not forget the Mar-a-Lago raid and a whole lot of other news came out just months before the 2022 election. And so the Donald Trump crazy was smack put back in America's face. And I don't necessarily think it was politics or partisanship or policy that moved some of those traditionally red wins into the blue column. I think it was a rejection of Donald Trump style candidates that caused that.
But here's my problem. Here's what I'm scared of. Alicia, I am scared that the leaders of your party see all of this. They're smart. They can read an electoral map. And they know, if it's Donald Trump again, we've got to somehow like claw back the even harder to reach states like Pennsylvania and Michigan. That seems like a harder proposition than it did in 2016 based on electoral success in the last 8 years. We've got to run the table on Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin. Not impossible, but hard with Donald Trump. But what if the economy were even worse? What if we were in a full-scale free fall recession? What if we were in another global Great Depression? That wouldn't be bad for our election chances. We might regain power that way. I think they're setting up this debt ceiling maneuver because they want to crash the economy. Because a year from now, after the economy crashes, voters won't remember who did what to whom and who was being unfair and who was hostage taking the American economy. They'll just blame the guy in charge, who's the president, who's President Biden. I think they're intentionally trying to crash the economy. Am I wrong?
I do think you're wrong. I don't think what McCarthy and they are doing is that calculated. I really don't. I don't think it's that forward thinking either. Look, he just had a success. He passed a package. It's probably going to get killed in the Senate anyway. And Biden said he's going to veto it. But I've maintained all along, I don't see the sky falling. I think the debt limit, I think it will be resolved. And I don't think anyone's going to crash the economy because most people in Congress, we're not talking about the Marjorie Taylor Greens. We're not even talking about the McCarthys of the world. Most people love their country and are not going to allow it to be economically or otherwise destroyed. Maybe I'm naive, but I don't see it.
I don't think you're naive. I think you're engaged in some hopeful thinking, not wishful, hopeful. You have hopes for the Republican Party because you believe that it can be redeemed. Once the majority of Republicans voted to overturn the results of the 2020 election, I lost hope that the Republican Party can be redeemed. I think they need to wander the wilderness and come back. I don't credit them with the foresight to be able to say, maybe this isn't so good if we bring the whole country down in order to be able to put a madman back in charge of the White House. I just think it's a tough topic. It's a tough topic to weed through. And before you know it, you begin to lose track of whose fault, blah, blah. You don't want to hear it. It's like when your kids are fighting. It's like you don't want to hear about who punched whom and who stuck bubble gum in whose hair. You want someone to fix it. You go to blame the person in charge. You blame the president.
I think in general, that's true. And you're right. This is a difficult topic. And I agree with you. It's both sides treat the American public like we're stupid on this issue. When the Republicans say, this is, you maxed out your credit card, so you just call up and increase your debt limit. That's not what this is. And they know it's not. And it drives me batty because you're treating the Americans like we're stupid and we're not. But while we may not be stupid, how many of us have time to look into all this? We don't have the time. I have the time because I have to do shows like this every week. And that's what I do in part for a living. But most Americans don't have the time to sit down and figure out what this means. So you got talking points on the right and talking points on the left, and you're hearing them and you're believing some of them, disbelieving others. And neither one of them is really telling us the full truth.
I want to bottle what you just said because it was brilliant, Alicia Preston, because you really did break down in a nutshell the problem here with the Republican talking points, which is they're connecting things that sound superficially similar, right? We have to stop spending, so we're not going to increase the debt limit. Those things, as you just said, have nothing to do with each other. If you want to use the credit card analogy, which you shouldn't because it does not apply, just trust me on that. If you want to use the credit card analogy, it's like saying, we're going to default on our mortgage and get kicked out of our house if we don't pay our bills. But I don't like how much we're spending, so let's do that. No, that's a bad idea. Please, listeners, don't do that. This isn't financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor, but don't do that. By the same token, we should not do that to our entire country and get kicked out of our house because Republicans in Congress are kowtowing to a far right that doesn't know what they want, except they want to throw a hissy fit about spending because they think it plays well in their polling.
It does, and it should. And I absolutely am opposed to the rampant spending that the Democrats in Congress keep pushing forward.
And the Republicans, because don't forget that under Donald Trump, our national debt increased by 25%.
Yes, it did. But right now, the Democrats are the ones pushing huge spending initiatives, and I am completely opposed to it. However, that has nothing to do with the debt ceiling and our need to increase it. And Partisans on both sides in Congress are playing the Americans for stupid because most, again, just don't have the time to look into every single policy issue and question out there.
There's a deal to actually be had here. Okay. Let's solve this for America right now. I'll be Kevin McCarthy. You be Joe Biden. Okay.
Okay. This will be fun.
I will come to you and I'll say, Joe, booby, I can't go back to my nutballs and not get a pound of flesh out of you. I've got to give them something on spending. And you say to me, Kevin, darling, Bubala, I hear you. But if I give in and we do a quid pro quo here, I will have negotiated with terrorists. If you give a mouse a cookie, they're going to want a glass of milk. And if you give a MAGA a deal for a debt ceiling increase, they're going to come back and they're going to crash the whole fucking economy next time. So why don't we do this? You give me a clean debt ceiling increase that has nothing to do with anything. And I promise you, and I keep my promises, that next month I will agree to a budget that reduces spending to the levels that you just passed in your last budget. They will be two separate things that we agree to all at once that are not connected and have nothing to do with each other. This is how we solved the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? We said to the Soviet Union, you right now have to pull your missiles out of Cuba. And in 6 months, in an apparently unconnected move, we will pull our Jupiter missiles out of Turkey. Let's Cuban Missile Crisis this. Let's save the world. You would do it, right?
I would do it, but would Chuck Schumer say yes?
Chuck would do it.
He's got progressives in his party that don't want him to. They don't want, and don't forget, this partisan blame the other side thing is happening everywhere. And the Democrats want to equally destroy the Republicans as much as the Republicans and do things that will make the Republicans look bad.
Here's why Chuck would do this, because he can also read an electoral map. And he knows that the Republicans' outs here are not that many. And that one of the few things that they would have going for them is a spiraling economy. If you take that off the board, their ability to crash the economy, that helps you long term. Don't forget, it's a really tough Senate map for Democrats in 2024. Really tough. The best thing that helps Chuck Schumer long term is strong economy, strong Joe Biden reelect. I think he would do that deal. It's a long-term play.
I'm not as confident as you are that I suppose you only need a few Democrats to go, 10, 12 Democrats to go along with it. Maybe he's able to pull that many. I'm not as confident as you that they won't stick their feet in the sand just to deliberately try to screw the Republicans.
Let's take this full circle, because we started with, can Joe Biden win? The thing that would give me the most pause as a member of your party is you can't beat something with nothing. And right now, the most likely something you're going to have is Donald Trump. And that doesn't look great. But I'm not sure that your backup options are that great either. Ron DeSantis is not doing well. Things are not going great for him right now. And there's plenty of videos that we have on the Blue Amp channel. I hope people will check them out, where we dive into this with close Florida political observers, explaining exactly why he's so flawed as a candidate. And then you look down the list, is Biden going to be much weaker against Mike Pence? Maybe yes against Tim Scott or Nikki Haley, but do they have any chance of winning the nomination? I'm just saying that, like, it's all well and good to say that in a vacuum, Joe Biden doesn't look that strong as an incumbent. But boy, when you put him in a head-to-head, I'm not sure what the Republicans have going here.
Well, here's what I think when it comes to Ron DeSantis. I think he has a lesser chance of being a nominee, presuming Trump stays in this race, than a Nikki Haley or a Tim Scott or another. And why that is because he's pulling from the same pool of voters as Donald Trump. And Donald Trump's way ahead of DeSantis with that pool of voters. If you're not voting for Donald Trump, you're probably only voting for DeSantis. He's just a less vile.
He's trying to be.
Of Donald Trump. But his policies and his programs are the same. So if someone other than Trump is able to get the nomination, I don't think it would be a DeSantis. Therefore, I think Biden's chances are greatly weakened against another Republican. I think Donald Trump is the best bet for Joe Biden, but I still think it's 50-50. But here's my conspiracy theory. You ready for this?
Oh, I love conspiracy.
So here's my conspiracy theory. All these attacks on Clarence Thomas, this is all going to make sense in a minute. All these attacks and perpetual going after Clarence Thomas. I've figured out why suddenly this is happening. You want to know why?
I do.
Joe Biden knows the better chance he has of winning again is if he has a stronger vice presidential candidate, because everyone's looking at Joe Biden's age. He'd be 86 by the end of another term. And everyone's going, what happens if Joe Biden, for whatever reason, cannot fulfill his term? We're left with Kamala Harris. Oh, hell no. So we get Clarence Thomas off the court. Joe Biden, can nominate Kamala Harris to the Supreme Court. She gets a bench there. I've got an open place for VP. I pull in somebody a little more moderate, certainly more younger and more palatable, maybe a woman, to the rest of the country. My chances just went up by several percent.
Wow. I would give that one a 6. It's not prima facie crazy. It's not crazy. Again, though, the flaw in it is who, right? You can't replace something with nothing. This has been great. For Alicia Preston, I'm Matt Robeson. We'll see you next time.